I've been treating a critically injured Bigfoot since November 2012, and what I've discovered about humanity's relationship with these beings will haunt me for the rest of my professional life. Some will call me delusional. Others will question my medical credentials, but after 11 years of silence, I believe the world needs to know the truth. My name is Dr. Elena Reeves. I'm 59 years old, and I run a small medical clinic in Forks, Washington, just outside Olympic National Park. This is my story, and I need to tell it exactly as it happened, because what I learned changes everything we think we know about these creatures and about ourselves. The night of November 14th, 2012 was unusually cold. Rain pattered against the windows of my clinic, where I'd stayed late catching up on paperwork. After 20 years working in Seattle's trauma centers, I'd moved to this remote area, seeking quieter medicine and a connection to the wilderness I'd loved since childhood. My clinic served loggers, park rangers, and the scattered residents of this densely forested region. I'd built a reputation as someone who asked few questions when treating injuries that might otherwise go unreported. Gunshot wounds from hunting accidents, chainsaw lacerations that should have required hospital care. At 11:47 p.m., my cell phone rang. The screen showed Jack Whitaker, a local guide I'd treated for hypothermia the previous winter. "Doc," his voice was tight, strained. "I need you at my cabin. Medical emergency. Can't bring them in. Please come now. Bring everything you can for a major trauma." "Jack, if it's that serious, they need a hospital." "No hospitals," he cut me off. "You'll understand when you get here. Please, Elena, I wouldn't ask if there were any other options." Something in his voice, fear, desperation, but also wonder, made me agree. I packed my emergency kit, suture materials, local anesthetics, antibiotics, bandaging supplies, IV fluids, blood clotting agents, and pain medications. The dirt road to Jack's hunting cabin was barely passable in my Subaru. Rain had turned to sleet, and the darkness between the towering firs seemed absolute. Jack was waiting outside when I arrived, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the tree line. "Thank God," he whispered, helping with my bags. "Inside, quickly." The cabin's single room was dimly lit by a kerosene lamp. The smell hit me first, a musky, earthy scent mixed with the metallic tang of fresh blood. Then I saw it. Lying on a makeshift bed of tarps and blankets was a creature that shouldn't exist. 7 feet tall, at least, covered in dense reddish-brown fur. Its chest rose and fell with labored breaths. Blood matted the fur along its left flank, where a wound approximately 2.5 centimeters in diameter oozed dark fluid. I dropped my bag. "What is this?" I whispered, though I knew. Everyone in these parts knew the legends. "Bigfoot," Jack said simply. "Female, I think. Found her collapsed near my western trapping line. Gunshot wound, not mine," he added quickly. "I would never." My medical training took over before my rational mind could process what I was seeing. I knelt beside the creature, whose dark eyes tracked my movements with unmistakable intelligence and fear. The wound was consistent with a high-caliber hunting rifle. Significant tissue damage, but the bullet appeared to have missed vital organs. "She's lost a lot of blood," I said, pulling on gloves. "I need to extract the bullet and clean this wound immediately." Jack nodded. "Will she survive?" "I don't know," I admitted, preparing a local anesthetic. "Her anatomy is similar to ours, but I'm working blind here." As I cleaned the wound, the creature made a sound. Not a growl, but a low, resonant vocalization that seemed to vibrate through the cabin's wooden walls. Her massive hand, with fingers proportionally similar to a human's but nearly twice the size, gripped the tarp beneath her. "It's okay," I said softly, the way I'd talk to any frightened patient. "I'm trying to help you." Her eyes, deep brown with flecks of amber, held mine. There was pain there, but something else too. Assessment, calculation. She was evaluating my intentions. I administered the anesthetic, extracted a .308 caliber bullet lodged against her rib, thicker and denser than a human's, irrigated the wound, and placed 7 deep sutures. Throughout the procedure, she remained conscious, watching me with those intelligent eyes that defied everything I'd been taught about the animal kingdom. "Jack," I said as I finished bandaging, "where did you really find her?" He hesitated. "About a mile north, but I wasn't alone when I found her. There was another one, bigger, male. He helped me bring her here. He's been watching the cabin. I think he's still out there." I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, the awareness of being observed. Looking toward the cabin's small window, I caught a glimpse of movement in the darkness outside. A massive silhouette, then nothing. "What are you going to do with her?" I asked, packing my supplies. "Keep her safe until she can travel, then let them go." Jack's voice was firm. "I've seen things in these woods for years, Doc. Things no one would believe. They've been here all along, watching us, avoiding us." I looked at my patient, her breathing steadier now. The enormity of what I'd just done, treating a creature that science said didn't exist, began to settle over me. "I'll need to check the wound tomorrow," I heard myself say. "Change the dressing. Watch for infection." Jack nodded, relief visible on his weathered face. "No one can know about this. Not ever." I agreed, but even then, something told me this night would change everything. As I drove home through the sleet, the image of those intelligent eyes stayed with me. I'd taken an oath to do no harm, to treat those in need. I never specified which species. I returned to Jack's cabin at dawn the next morning, medical bag restocked with antibiotics, fresh bandages, and stronger painkillers. The forest was quiet, shrouded in mist that clung to the towering Douglas firs. I parked 50 yards away and approached on foot, a precaution that felt necessary, though I couldn't articulate why. Jack met me outside, rifle slung over his shoulder, eyes red from a sleepless night. "She's awake," he said softly, "and not alone." Inside the cabin, the female Bigfoot was sitting upright on her makeshift bed, her 7-foot frame hunched to avoid the ceiling. Her breathing had improved, but her movements were stiff, guarding the wounded side. What stopped me in my tracks was the massive figure crouched in the corner, the male I'd glimpsed through the window the previous night. He was enormous, at least 8 feet 2 inches, with shoulders nearly 4 feet across, covered in dark brown fur that lightened around a face that was both human and not human. Deep-set eyes beneath a heavy brow ridge watched my every move. His hands, resting on powerful thighs, could have easily encircled my waist. "He came inside just before sunrise," Jack whispered. "Hasn't made a threatening move, but he could tear us apart if he wanted to," I finished, setting my bag down slowly. I approached the female with measured steps, hands visible, voice low and even. "I need to check your wound," I said, though I had no idea if she understood. "I'm here to help." To my astonishment, she extended her arm in a gesture that unmistakably granted permission. The male shifted, a low rumble emanating from his chest, but he remained in his corner. The wound looked remarkably better than it should have after just 12 hours. the edges already showing signs of healing that would take days in a human patient. I cleaned it gently, applied fresh antibiotics, and rebandaged the area. Her fur was softer than it appeared, with an undercoat similar to a wolf's. Her skin temperature measured 101.2 degrees Fahrenheit with my thermometer. Higher than human normal, but likely normal for her species. What fascinated me was her clear understanding of the treatment process. She lifted her arm when needed, tensed in anticipation of pain before I touched tender areas, and made soft vocalizations that seemed to communicate with the male, who would respond in kind. Their laryngeal structure must be different from ours, I murmured, more to myself than to Jack. Those sounds aren't just noises, they're communicating. While dressing the wound, I noticed other details. Old scars along her right leg and shoulder, healed fractures in several fingers that had reset imperfectly, and a distinctive notch in her left ear. This wasn't a creature that had lived an easy life in the wilderness. After completing the treatment, I backed away, maintaining eye contact with the female. She made a sound, 3 soft clicks followed by a rumbling note, and reached toward a small pile of objects beside her. With deliberate movements, she selected what appeared to be a smooth river stone with bands of quartz running through it, and held it out to me. "I think she's thanking you," Jack said, voice hushed with wonder. I accepted the stone, its surface warm from her touch. "You're welcome," I said, touching my chest lightly. The female mirrored my gesture, pressing her massive hand to her own chest. Over the next 2 weeks, I visited the cabin daily. The female's recovery was remarkable. By day 5, she was standing. By day 8, walking short distances. The male was always present, gradually moving closer during my visits, his initial wariness slowly giving way to what I could only describe as curiosity. I began bringing items beyond medical supplies, a sketch pad and pencils, field guides to local flora, picture books. Their reaction to images was fascinating. Recognition, communication between them, sometimes disagreement about what they were seeing. By the 3rd week, we'd developed a rudimentary communication system. They understood dozens of words and responded with consistent vocalizations and gestures. I learned that certain hand positions indicated pain, hunger, agreement, or danger. They learned that I would respond to specific sounds they made. During one visit, the female, whom I'd begun thinking of as Willow for the flexibility and strength she displayed, reached beneath her bedding and produced something unexpected. A small collection of human-made items wrapped in a piece of tattered canvas. With careful movements, she unwrapped the bundle, revealing a weathered compass, a tarnished silver locket, and what appeared to be military dog tags so old and corroded the name was illegible. The male, who moved with the authority of a protector, whom I'd mentally named Guardian, made a low, warning sound. Willow responded with a softer tone that seemed to reassure him. She pushed the items toward me, her intelligent eyes holding mine. There was a purpose in this revelation, something she wanted me to understand. These weren't random objects she'd found, they were collected, preserved, protected. They had meaning. "Where did you get these?" I asked, though I knew she couldn't answer in words I'd understand. Instead, she made a series of gestures, pointing to the wound in her side, then to the objects, then making a sweeping motion that encompassed the world beyond the cabin walls. Guardian approached slowly, his massive frame casting shadows in the lantern light. He knelt beside Willow and placed his hand on the canvas. Then, with movements surprisingly delicate for his size, he folded the canvas back over the items and pushed them firmly toward me. The message couldn't have been clearer. Take these. Learn from them. There is more to our story than you know. I accepted the bundle, a weight far heavier than its physical presence settling over me. I'll keep them safe, I promised, though I had no idea what I was truly agreeing to. That night, examining the items in my clinic office, I realized the tarnished locket contained a faded photograph of a young man in what appeared to be a 1940s military uniform. The first piece of a puzzle I didn't yet understand I was solving. I spent the following week examining the items Willow had given me. The dog tags belonged to a Private Robert Madsen, stationed at Fort Lewis in 1943. The compass, while weathered, had U.S. Army Corps faintly etched on its brass back. These weren't random finds. They told a story of military presence in these forests decades ago. By early December, Willow's wound had healed to a pink scar barely visible beneath her fur. She moved with her full strength again, and I knew she and Guardian would soon return to the wilderness. During what I thought might be one of our final visits, Willow did something unexpected. As I packed my medical bag, she took my hand, her massive fingers engulfing mine, and led me to a bare patch of earth near the cabin's wood stove. Using a stick, she began to draw. First, a simple outline of a humanoid figure, tall, broad-shouldered, a Bigfoot. Then several smaller figures with straight lines extending from their hands. Humans with guns. Her movements became more urgent as she drew X marks over several Bigfoot figures, then pointed to the scars on her body. Some I hadn't even noticed before. Guardian watched from the corner, his breathing heavy, eyes reflecting the flickering lantern light. He approached slowly and took the stick from Willow. His drawing was more precise. A series of squares and rectangles that I realized represented buildings. He drew paths connecting them, then more human figures surrounding the structures. "They're showing us a camp," Jack whispered, his face pale in the dim light. "A military installation." Guardian made a low, mournful sound and drew a final shape, a rough circle with lines radiating from it. I didn't understand until he pointed to the scar on Willow's side, then to his drawing. "A bullet," I said. "No. A tracking device?" Guardian nodded. A human gesture he'd learned from watching us. He brushed his hand across the dirt, erasing most of the drawing, but leaving the tracked Bigfoot and the camp intact. The message was clear. Their kind was being hunted, captured, studied. That night, I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I drove to the county library in Port Angeles. The elderly librarian raised an eyebrow when I requested archived newspapers from the 1940s and any information on military operations in Olympic National Forest. "Research project," I explained with a forced smile. Hours later, my hands trembled as I pieced together fragments of a hidden history. A classified operation called Project Woodland Sentinel had established observation posts throughout the Olympic and Cascade Ranges in 1943, officially to watch for Japanese incursions along the Pacific coast. But buried in the dry language of military reports were references to unidentified bipedal subjects and biological specimens of interest. A small article from October 1944 reported that 3 hunters had discovered a large ape-like creature shot dead near Sappho. The body was quickly confiscated by military personnel. The incident was attributed to wartime nerves and likely a bear misidentified in poor lighting conditions. I found 5 similar reports between 1943 and 1965, each followed by military involvement and subsequent dismissal of the claims. The pattern was unmistakable. Back at my clinic that evening, I noticed something I'd overlooked before. The corroded edge of Private Madsen's dog tag had a small hole drilled through it. not a standard feature of military identification. Under my microscope, I could see the remnants of wiring. This wasn't just a dog tag. It had been modified to serve another purpose. A tracking device, primitive by today's standards, but advanced for its time. 2 days later, Jack called in a panic. "Someone's been at the cabin," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Checking the area. They're wearing civilian clothes, but they move like military. Willow and Guardian are hiding in the hills, but they're watching. Something's happening, Doc." I arrived to find boot prints surrounding the cabin. At least 3 different tread patterns. Inside, things had been subtly disturbed. The area where Willow had drawn her pictures was completely clean, as if someone had deliberately swept it. That afternoon, I contacted Bill Henderson, a retired park ranger in his 80s who'd worked these forests since the 1950s. We met at a diner in Forks, his roomy eyes scanning the room before he would speak. "They've always been here," he said, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug. "And they've always been watched. Started with the military, moved to other agencies over the years. They keep it quiet, but some of us knew." "Why?" I asked. "Why hunt them?" Bill leaned forward. "Their blood, their tissue, it's different. They heal faster than we do. They resist diseases that kill us. Some folks in power believe they're the key to medical breakthroughs. Others just fear what's different." As we spoke, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street, its windows tinted dark. A man in a dark jacket stood near it, seemingly focused on his phone. "Don't look now," Bill murmured, "but you're being watched. Have been since you walked in." Cold fear washed over me. What do I do? Bill's eyes, suddenly sharp despite his age, locked with mine. "Decide whose side you're on. Once you know, there's no going back." When I returned to my clinic that evening, I found my filing cabinet slightly ajar. Nothing was missing, but someone had been there. In the dirt outside my window were footprints that didn't belong to anyone I knew. I stood in my small office, the reality of what I'd stumbled into finally sinking in. This wasn't just about helping an injured being. I had uncovered something much darker, a systematic program to hunt an intelligent species for human benefit. My security cameras, installed after a break-in last year, had captured grainy footage of 2 men in dark clothing examining the exterior of my clinic. Government agents, private contractors, whoever they were, they knew about Willow and Guardian, and now they knew about me. That night, I made a decision that would change the course of my life. I couldn't walk away from Willow and Guardian. Whatever danger might come, I had to protect them. Before sunrise, I drove to Jack's cabin with a plan. We would move Willow and Guardian deeper into the wilderness, away from the trails, away from the eyes I now felt watching from every shadow. "There's a hunting shelter about 7 miles north," Jack said, tracing a path on his worn topographic map. "Built it 15 years ago. No one knows about it but me. Not even on any Forest Service maps. By mid-morning, we had helped the Bigfoot pair navigate to the remote shelter, a simple structure nestled against a rocky outcropping, nearly invisible amongst the towering firs. The journey revealed how differently they moved through the forest compared to humans. Where Jack and I stumbled over roots and crashed through underbrush, Willow and Guardian glided with a silence that seemed impossible for creatures their size. The shelter became our meeting place over the following weeks. I visited every 3 days, bringing food, medical supplies, and items to help build our communication. A picture book became our most valuable tool. I would point to images, speak the words, and they would attempt to mimic the sounds or respond with their own vocalizations. Their ability to learn was remarkable. Within a month, Willow could understand over 50 English words. One cold January morning, Willow greeted me with unusual excitement. She took my hand and placed it gently on her abdomen. Beneath the thick fur, I felt a slight firmness, a subtle change in her body's contour. "Are you pregnant?" I asked, professional instincts immediately assessing what this might mean medically. She made a soft, trilling sound I'd come to recognize as affirmation. Guardian stood nearby, his posture somehow both protective and proud. The implication staggered me. I wasn't just treating an injured being anymore. I was now responsible for the welfare of a mother and her unborn child, a child from a species science claimed didn't exist. During subsequent visits, I brought my portable ultrasound machine. The images were difficult to interpret through their dense musculature, but the fetal heartbeat was strong and steady at 142 beats per minute, slightly faster than a human fetus at comparable development. Based on measurements and Willow's physical changes, I estimated she was in her second trimester of what appeared to be a pregnancy similar in length to humans. As winter deepened, our communication grew more sophisticated. Guardian began showing me plants they used medicinally, a yellow flowering herb they applied to wounds, a particular moss they consumed for stomach ailments, roots they chewed to reduce pain. I documented everything, collecting samples when possible, testing some in my clinic's modest lab. Some of these plants contained compounds unknown to modern pharmacology. The yellow flowers held an anti-inflammatory agent more potent than anything in our pharmacies. The moss contained natural antibiotics that worked against bacteria resistant to our strongest medications. This knowledge, passed through generations of their kind, could transform human medicine. In return, I taught them basic medical care, how to clean wounds properly, how to create effective bandages from natural materials, how to set broken bones. Willow proved an apt pupil, her dexterous fingers quickly mastering the techniques despite their size. During a heavy snowfall in February, I arrived at the shelter to find Guardian unusually agitated. He led me to a fallen log about 50 yards from the shelter. There, partially covered by fresh snow, lay a small electronic device the size of a cigarette pack. A wildlife camera, but unlike any standard model I'd seen. No markings, no brand name, just a sleek black case with a small lens. Someone had found our location. For the next week, I varied my routes to the shelter, sometimes hiking miles out of my way, doubling back, crossing streams to break my trail. I became hyper-aware of vehicles that appeared more than once on my drives, of hikers who seemed too well equipped for casual woodland strolls, of the small drone I spotted once hovering high above the forest canopy. "They're closing in," Jack warned when we met to exchange supplies. Two men came to my property yesterday, said they were from the wildlife department, asking about unusual animal activity. They knew my name before I introduced myself. My clinic began receiving unexpected visitors as well. Men in casual clothes asking vague questions about local wildlife injuries I might have treated. A woman claiming to be writing a book about rural medicine requested an interview, her questions eventually circling to whether I'd encountered anything unexplainable in my practice. One night in late February, I returned home to find my door unlocked. Nothing was visibly disturbed, but the hairs on my neck stood up. In my office, my journal of observations about Willow and Guardian was still hidden where I'd secured it behind a loose baseboard, but the dust I'd carefully arranged on the floor showed footprints. They had searched but not found. Not this time. That night, I digitized all my notes, encrypted the files, and stored them on a series of small drives I could easily conceal or transport. The original journal I reburied beneath the clinic's storage shed in a waterproof container. When Willow's pregnancy reached the 3rd trimester, her need for protein increased dramatically. Guardian would bring her fish from the nearby river, but it wasn't enough. I began delivering supplements, additional calories, whatever I could provide to ensure the health of mother and child. During these visits, our connection deepened beyond doctor and patient. We shared food, they teaching me which berries were sweetest, which roots most nutritious, I bringing simple meals they sampled with careful curiosity. One evening, as snow fell softly outside the shelter, Willow took my hand and placed it alongside Guardian's massive palm. A gesture of family, of belonging. In that moment, I understood that what I'd discovered wasn't just a new species, but a new definition of humanity itself. The truth was both beautiful and terrifying. And I knew with absolute certainty that the people searching for us would never see it that way. 3 years passed, during which I became more than a doctor to Willow and Guardian. I became their protector, confidant, and the bridge between two worlds that seemed destined to remain separate. I watched their daughter, whom I called Luna for the full moon night when she was born, grow from a helpless infant into a curious, nimble toddler with eyes that held the same intelligence as her parents. At 3 years old, she stood nearly 5 feet tall, her fur a striking blend of her mother's reddish-brown and her father's darker coloring. She was the first of her kind to grow up knowing a human as ally rather than threat. Spring of 2016 arrived with unusual warmth, bringing early hikers to the forest trails. I became increasingly cautious with my visits, sometimes waiting days for the perfect weather conditions, heavy rain or dense fog, to mask my journey to the shelter. Despite my precautions, signs of intrusion multiplied. Twice, Guardian discovered small devices planted near their water source, metal cylinders no larger than my thumb with miniature antennas. Tracking devices, more sophisticated than what I'd seen before. On a misty May morning, I arrived at the shelter to find Willow arranging pine boughs in a specific pattern on the ground, a warning signal we had established. Guardian emerged from the trees moments later, his massive frame moving with an urgency I'd rarely seen. Through our now sophisticated communication system of gestures, vocalizations, and the limited English words they understood, they conveyed what they had witnessed. A team of 6 humans, armed and equipped with advanced gear, methodically searching the northwestern forest quadrant. Not hunters, not hikers, searchers. How close? I asked, cold fear settling in my stomach. Guardian held up 3 fingers, then pointed to the sun and drew an arc in the air. 3 days, moving in our direction. Luna huddled against her mother, sensing the tension, her small fingers gripping Willow's fur. That afternoon, I hiked to a ridge overlooking the northern valley, my binoculars scanning the terrain below. At first, I saw nothing unusual, just the undulating green canopy stretching toward distant mountains. Then, a flash of movement caught my eye. 3 figures in mottled gray and green clothing, moving with military precision between the trees. One carried what appeared to be a rifle, with an unusual attachment beneath the barrel, not a standard scope or flashlight mount. I carefully made my way back to my clinic, mind racing with contingency plans. Just as I pulled into my driveway, a black SUV with government plates parked behind me, blocking my exit. 2 men in casual clothing approached, their posture and bearing unmistakably military, despite their civilian appearance. "Dr. Elena Reeves?" the taller one asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Yes," I replied, clutching my medical bag as if it might shield me from what was coming. "I'm Dr. Marcus Harding, Department of Advanced Biological Research. This is my colleague, Agent Townsend. We'd like to ask you some questions about certain medical services you might have provided to unusual patients." The careful phrasing, the steady gaze, the subtle confidence in his tone. This wasn't a fishing expedition. They knew. "I treat everyone who comes to my clinic," I answered, my voice steadier than I felt. "Doctor-patient confidentiality prevents me from discussing specific cases." This would be a rather large case. Dr. Harding smiled without warmth. "Approximately 7 to 8 feet tall, covered in fur. Ring any bells?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "I'm not sure what you're implying, but it sounds like you're describing a bear." "May we come in?" Agent Townsend gestured toward my clinic. Again, not really a question. Inside, Dr. Harding wasted no time with pretense. He placed a folder on my desk, opening it to reveal high-resolution photographs. Guardian carrying fish to the shelter. Willow with Luna partly visible behind her, and most damning of all, me, clearly administering medical care to Willow's wounded arm after she had been injured by a fallen tree limb last winter. "We've been monitoring this region for decades, Dr. Reeves. These creatures are of significant interest to national security and medical advancement. Their genetic makeup, their resistance to disease, their accelerated healing. Surely, as a physician, you can appreciate the potential benefits to humanity." "By hunting them?" I asked, unable to hide my disgust. "By treating sentient beings as lab specimens?" "They're animals, Doctor. Highly evolved, certainly, but not human. The research we've already conducted on previously acquired specimens has led to breakthroughs in tissue regeneration and immunotherapy. Imagine what we could accomplish with fresh subjects, especially a juvenile whose systems haven't fully matured." The implication sent ice through my veins. "You're talking about Luna." "We're talking about Subject 37C, offspring of Subjects 37A and 37B," Townsend corrected coldly. "And we're prepared to offer you a position with our research team. Your observations over these years are valuable. You could continue your work under proper scientific protocols." "And if I refuse?" Dr. Harding closed the folder with deliberate slowness. "Then you'll be charged with interfering with a federal research program, practicing medicine on unauthorized subjects, and potentially bioterrorism if we determine you've extracted and experimented with biological materials from these creatures without proper containment protocols." "They're not creatures," I said, my voice low but firm. "They're people. Different from us, but people. They communicate, they love their child, they create, they remember. What you're proposing isn't research, it's kidnapping. It's vivisection. Your cooperation would make this transition easier for everyone involved," Harding continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Less traumatic for the subjects, less complicated for you." "I need time to consider," I said, buying the only thing I could. 24 hours, Townsend replied. "We'll return tomorrow morning for your answer. In the meantime, I wouldn't recommend any forest excursions. Our team is already in position." After they left, I stood frozen in my clinic, the magnitude of what was happening crashing over me in waves. They would take Luna. They would take Willow and Guardian. They would cut them open, study them, exploit them, all in the name of scientific advancement. and they would destroy anyone who stood in their way. I had one day to save a family that science said didn't exist from a government that would never acknowledge their capture. I moved swiftly, my mind clear despite the terror pounding through my veins. First, I gathered everything I'd documented over the past 4 years: medical notes, photographs, recordings of their vocalizations, samples of the medicinal plants, and most importantly, the detailed journal tracking their language development, social structure, and intelligence. I created 3 identical packages, each containing a complete copy of my findings along with a letter explaining how I came to meet Willow and Guardian, what I had learned, and the government's intent to capture them. One package I addressed to Dr. Catherine Walsh, an ethicist and primatologist at the University of Washington, whose work on great ape cognition had established radical new protections for non-human primates. The second I sent to Ethan Zimmerman, an environmental journalist who had exposed several government cover-ups related to endangered species. The third I kept with me, insurance against what was coming. By nightfall, I had emptied my bank accounts, packed essential supplies into my Subaru, and called Jack. "They're coming tomorrow," I told him, voice barely above a whisper, though I knew my phone was likely compromised. "We need to move them tonight. Far north, into the Olympic Mountains. There are caves near Mount Olympus that Guardian mapped for me last year, emergency shelters they've used for generations." Through pouring rain, Jack and I navigated to the shelter. Willow, Guardian, and Luna were already preparing to leave, their few possessions: handcrafted tools, collected treasures, the picture books I'd brought them, bundled in salvaged tarps. I gave them a waterproof backpack containing medical supplies, preservable food, and a detailed topographic map with safe routes marked in red. Guardian took my hands in his massive ones, his deep brown eyes holding mine with an intensity that transcended language. He made a series of soft vocalizations that I had come to understand meant gratitude, friendship, family. Willow joined him, pressing her forehead gently against mine, their most intimate gesture of connection. Luna approached last, her small hand offering me a perfect spiral shell she had treasured since finding it by the river last summer. "Stay safe," I whispered, tears mixing with raindrops on my face. "Stay hidden." I knew this was goodbye. For their safety, I could never seek them out again. We parted just after midnight, the Bigfoot family melting into the darkness of the forest with a silence that defied their size, heading north toward the most remote wilderness of the Olympic Peninsula. Jack and I returned separately to our homes, our final contingency plans in place. Dr. Harding and Agent Townsend arrived at my clinic precisely at 8 a.m., accompanied by 2 additional men whose military bearing was poorly disguised by civilian clothing. "Your decision, Dr. Reeves," Harding asked without preamble. "I won't help you hunt them," I replied simply. "They're intelligent beings deserving of protection, not exploitation." The raid began immediately. 6 agents searched my clinic and home, confiscating my computer, phone, medical equipment, and anything that might contain evidence of my interaction with the Bigfoot family. I was detained in a black SUV while they worked, Townsend sitting across from me, his expression unreadable. "You've committed career suicide," he said finally. "Possibly actual suicide, depending what we find." "I've upheld my Hippocratic oath," I countered. "First, do no harm." The search team found nothing of significance. I had been thorough in my preparations. By late afternoon, they departed with their meager evidence, leaving me with a formal notice of investigation and the suspension of my medical license pending further proceedings. 3 days later, the news broke. Ethan Zimmerman's article, titled "Government Program Targets Undiscovered Primate Species for Medical Experimentation," appeared simultaneously on 3 major news websites. Dr. Walsh held a press conference discussing the ethical implications of my evidence, presenting the recordings and photographs as proof of an intelligent, social species being systematically hunted. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. Environmentalists, indigenous rights advocates, and medical ethicists demanded investigations. The government issued predictable denials, claiming my evidence was fabricated, that I was mentally unstable, that the photographs showed nothing more than bears or people in costumes. 2 weeks after the story broke, my clinic was vandalized. Windows shattered, walls spray-painted with the words "crazy" and "liar." The following day, I received official notice that my medical license had been permanently revoked for gross professional misconduct and delusional behavior endangering public trust. I sold my clinic and home in Washington and moved to a small town in northern Montana, where the mountains reminded me of the forests I'd left behind. Using what remained of my savings, I purchased a modest cabin on 10 acres of woodland and began a new, quieter life. 6 months after my relocation, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was a small wooden carving of 3 figures, 2 large, 1 small, standing together. The craftsmanship was primitive but unmistakable, the wood worked by hands much stronger than human ones. Alongside it lay a small bundle of the yellow healing flowers that Willow had once shown me, impossibly fresh. They had survived. They had found safety. In the years since, I've lived with the knowledge that what we call humanity isn't defined by our DNA or our appearance, but by our capacity for compassion, for family bonds, for protecting those we love. The true horror wasn't the existence of Bigfoot. It was our reaction to them, our immediate impulse to capture, to cut, to exploit, our refusal to recognize intelligence and sentience in forms different from our own. I never saw Willow, Guardian, or Luna again, but occasionally, hiking in the mountains near my new home, I leave an offering on a flat rock. Fresh fruit, medical supplies, a new picture book. And sometimes those offerings disappear, replaced by a perfect river stone or a cluster of healing herbs that don't grow in this region. I no longer practice medicine officially, but I continue to document the medicinal properties of the plants Guardian showed me, developing treatments that I share freely with anyone willing to listen. Some of these remedies have already saved lives when conventional medicine failed. The government still monitors me. Occasional vehicles with tinted windows parked on the road near my property. Strange electronic interference with my satellite internet. But the story is out there now, impossible to completely suppress. Other witnesses have come forward with their own encounters. Other doctors and scientists have begun to question. What haunts me isn't what I discovered about Bigfoot. It's what I discovered about us. Our willingness to destroy what we don't understand. Our readiness to inflict suffering in the name of progress. Our failure to recognize the sacred boundaries of life, intelligence, and consciousness. I lost my career, my home, and my reputation. But I gained something more valuable, the knowledge that humanity extends beyond our species, that intelligence wears many faces, and that compassion must transcend our differences if we are to evolve as a species worthy of the planet we inhabit. Sometimes at night, I hear distant vocalizations echoing from the mountains. 3 soft notes followed by a lower call. Probably just the wind, or wolves, or my imagination seeking comfort in familiar sounds. But sometimes, just sometimes, I answer back.